This is the only way I can articulate what it's like to move to a foreign country and learn the language from scratch. You can hear the sounds, you can make out words, but everything is just kind of out of focus. It's like, is that a red light? Should I stop here? Should I start? No, okay, we're starting. And you get pulled along by the chaos of everyday life, and yet things are still out of focus. And just as things start to get a little clearer and you glimpse the way forward, suddenly things take an unexpected turn and move into unknown territory and you're lost again. You can't yet fully grasp the beauty of what lies before you, but if you're like me, you don't give up.
Deutsch ist nicht einfach. Jedenfalls war es für mich nicht einfach. Die gute Nachricht? Es wird leichter mit der Zeit.
And as the Germans like to say, aller Anfang ist schwer. So there are those who take to a foreign language like a duck to water. They just seem to pick it up without really even having to try. And then there's me. Learning languages was never something I was interested in. I was never any good at it. And I could blame it on the English education system. I mean, foreign languages are definitely not a priority there. And according to The Guardian, entries have more than halved over the last 10 years, with only 2,261 students taking German A-levels in 2024. Just over 2,000 students in the UK choosing to learn German. That is ridiculously low. But despite these declines, efforts are underway to promote language learning. Initiatives like Making the Case for German, supported by the Goethe Institute and the UK Department of Education, aim to re-energize interest in German studies within state-maintained schools. And all I can say with that is good luck. So yes, the education system certainly does play a role. It means that most adult Brits who come to live in Germany do so with almost zero knowledge or experience of the language, and I am a prime example of this. Learning German has been one of the most humbling experiences of my life, and as a native English speaker, I thought my familiarity with Germanic roots would give me a head start, but it didn't. It was a painful journey, one of determination, humiliation, patience, and grit. And so if you are a native English speaker watching this, especially if you are British, it is very unlikely that you will just pick up the language when you move abroad. Likely you will need to put in a lot of energy and effort. Now, many people will find this controversial, but it is harder for native English speakers to learn foreign languages than it is for most other people. Now, if that triggered you, I'm going to get into why that is in just a moment, but it just means that if we want to get good, we have to put in more effort and be very stubborn and unyielding when it comes to practicing in real life. Now, my goal when learning a foreign language is to communicate effectively with other people. I'm not interested in spending hours reading books and poring over grammar tables. One of my school friends studied German at university, but that is really a very different kind of German to what you actually need on a day-to-day basis for living in the country. We are not academics here, and while studying Goethe or Schiller might be interesting, it won't help you with everyday conversations. When starting anything new, the beginning is key, and from the start, it was clear that German was not going to come easily to me. The grammar alone was enough to make my head spin. You know, the cases, the gendered nouns, separable verbs, it just felt like I was juggling 5 balls when I could barely handle 2. And quite honestly, the first language I learned was Mandarin Chinese, which I've subsequently all but forgotten, but I found that much easier than German. The grammar, the sentence structure, the word order is actually very similar to English. I still constantly mix up der, die and das, which sometimes is just a silly mistake, but sometimes it can actually change the complete meaning of the word entirely, like der Bank, the bench, or die Bank, the bank. Der Leiter, the leader, die Leiter, the ladder, der Kiefer, the jaw, die Kiefer, the pine tree, der Schild, the shield, das Schild, the sign or label, der Gehalt, the content, or das Gehalt, the pay or salary. So each mistake really felt like a glaring spotlight on my own inadequacy. But the language itself is not actually the thing that makes it difficult to learn. It is the fact that I am a native English speaker. Now, before you roll your eyes in exasperation, let me just explain. No one seems to understand this, but learning foreign languages is just much harder for native English speakers than it is for most other people. Now, why is that? Well, because English is everywhere. It's everywhere you go, especially in Europe. There is a hunger and an appetite for the English language. The first year of my stay in China was in a provincial city where not everyone could speak English, and so I had no choice but to just try my best and do everything I could to communicate in Chinese. And because of this, because everything, is foreign there, including the street signs and the written language, you really need to have a grasp of the language to get around there. Even just talking to like taxi drivers or getting public transport, you need, there is a necessity. And so I picked up the basic pretty quickly out of literal necessity. I didn't have an option. But in Germany, now bear this in mind, I am talking about the major cities. Obviously, it's a little bit different in the countryside, but still, most people in Germany have a basic understanding of English. They can speak a few words. And at least my experience was when I first moved here that as soon as people heard my accent, they would just automatically switch to English. And in fact, this still happens now, even today, because I can't hide my accent. And it's a common issue that many foreigners experience. The thing is, it doesn't really matter what the motivations are, if people are excited to get the opportunity to practice, or if they're trying to be helpful, or if they are actually just being rude and basically telling you that they don't have the patience to humor your painful attempt to speak their language. It's all a moot point, because the reality is that you have to be very stubborn and relentless, otherwise you won't get the practice that you need and you won't learn the language. If German doesn't come naturally to you, then it's very easy to get by without it. On top of that, in the UK, we just don't have this tradition of learning languages. Like I mentioned before, it's not something which is prioritized in the education system, and we also don't have this tradition of speaking multiple dialects. Another advantage that Germans, and I believe many other European countries have, although do correct me on this if I'm wrong, is that they grow up speaking at least 2 languages from birth. So most Germans will speak what is known as High German, so the language that you will learn in the classroom, that you hear on the news. But they also speak their own regional dialect at home with their family and friends. And so sometimes this is just maybe like a different accent, but more often than not, it's actually almost like a pretty, totally new language with different words and different sentence structure. Like, can Bavarians understand Hessisch or Schwäbisch or Sächsisch? Hast du Kaffee schon getrunken? Would you understand what that means? This is a culture that just does not exist in the UK. Like, the only instance that you would ever speak RP English, as in the Queen's English, if you don't do that naturally, is to take the piss. I know accent discrimination is a thing, but I have yet to hear of people who speak RP at work and then go home and let their Liverpool drawl or their London slang out. Like, this is just not something that happens in the UK. And in fact, I remember one of the first books I read in German was A Chick by Wolfgang Herrndorf, which is really good for beginners. The reason being is that it is written kind of like the spoken language. So it's written as if the character was speaking to a friend. So it's really simple, but it also includes a lot of youth slang, and it's just something that you will not learn in the classroom. And if you really want to dive into accents and dialects, the best way is to immerse yourself in German TV and film. This can be a really powerful inroad into the language, because once you find something that grabs your interest, learning and curiosity just kind of takes over, and you forget about studying grammar tables or memorizing words. You just start to learn organically. And that's why I'm really excited to be working with LingoPie, because they know that delving into film can really help you learning the language. I thought my own German was pretty good, but actually it's really helped to expand and increase my vocabulary. So they created the ultimate platform where you can watch a massive selection of your favorite shows and films with the ability to make use of incredible language learning tools. You can turn on German or English or both languages at the same time. You can click on any word you don't know to get an immediate translation, and you can add it to your vocabulary list later for further study. You can slow down down the speed, see the entire transcript on the side. You can read along, go back, or jump ahead, and you can even loop a sentence until you get it right. LingoPie has over 3,000 native shows and movies, but not only that, you can actually use its Netflix and Disney Plus extensions to enhance your learning. You can choose from German cult classics like Dark or Cleo, dramas like Oktoberfest, Beer and Blood, and if reality TV is your thing, they've got you covered. Comedy, cooking, the list really goes on. And whether you are living in Germany or not, this is the perfect way to gain exposure to the language, to get accustomed to different accents and dialects, to expand your vocabulary and build up your own personal bank of common phrases. Oh, and just in case German isn't enough for you, you will have access to 11 more languages with LingoPie. So if you're interested, click the link in the description below to start your 7-day free trial today. This really helps support the channel, and this link will also get you an exclusive discount once inside. Now, a very big reason why most Brits never learn German or the foreign language of the country they're living in when they move as adults is because of a key decision that is not made at the beginning. The comfort of English in Germany and in many other countries is it's constant. The temptation is everywhere, and it's one that's quite hard to resist. And so this is why I say it's harder for native English speakers to learn foreign languages. So this is a decision that I made early on. I decided to avoid English speakers like the plague. So from my experience of living in China, I learned that once you start to make friends and build contacts, those friends, those contacts know other people who, are probably also English speakers or who like and want to learn or practice their English. And before you know it, you're in this bubble, and it's very, very difficult to get out of that once you're in it. And so if you are someone who struggles with language learning, this is the first trap that you must avoid. Now, don't just assume that by moving here you will pick up the language. It still takes a concerted effort and a lot of lifestyle choices to get it right. One thing I've come to understand is that language is really just the beginning. As my German improved, I realized that language really is just the first step to integration and to really getting to know people and the culture. There are just so many cultural references that I didn't get at the start. So many in-jokes and plays on words that only comes with a long period of deep immersion. And there are even supposedly British cultural references that are cult in Germany, which I just had never heard of before. Like white wine with the fish. No British person understands this reference. It's referring to a cult TV program which is played every year at New Year's Eve and is for whatever reason not dubbed like all other German television, but kept in the original English. And this is something that Germans really like to mention when they know that you're from the UK, because they're trying to connect and find some sort of common ground. And I'm just like, sorry, I've never heard of this. And also, if you come into contact with, let's say, middle-aged people or people that are slightly older and they know you're from the UK, like their eyes will light up and they'll say something like, auf den Spuren von Rosamunde Pilcher. And again, it's like, what? I've never heard of this before moving here. And this was a British author who was very popular in the 80s and 90s, who wrote books which were set in Cornwall and Scotland. And these books are actually responsible for a huge amount of German tourism. So many German tourists go to Cornwall and Scotland specifically because they've read these books. And these books have been dramatized, and reruns are still aired on ZDF to this day. But it was, again, like something I had never heard of before coming here, and it's supposedly British culture. And for some reason, for whatever reason, certain cultural things seem to take off here in Germany before gaining international acclaim. The Beatles toured through Germany before they were ever famous in the UK and later worldwide. The Backstreet Boys credit Germany to their rise in the 90s, and there are just certain celebrities like David Hasselhoff that are seen as a national treasure here. I mean, even though I don't know if Baywatch was popular here, maybe it was, but it's just sometimes difficult to understand why certain cultural things take off here and not in other countries. Another thing that completely threw me off were dialects, making entire conversations feel like decoding another foreign language all over again. Like, I still can't really understand Hessisch. I understand a few words and phrases, but if there are two people speaking Hessisch, I'm just like, what is going on? Again, there's a lot of like German songs and nursery rhymes which carry a lot of weight, a lot of nostalgia for people that grew up with these things, which I just can't access, which really is kind of normal. There are just layers of culture that are deeply personal, shaped by growing up in a specific place or time, but no amount of language learning can really replace that. And so this did actually frustrate me quite a lot at the beginning, because I just thought, my language, like, I'm pretty good, I'm fluent in German, but I'm still like just not able to follow the conversation. But after a while, like, rather than seeing this as a limitation, I began to see it as an invitation. And each missed reference is, it's a chance to ask questions, to learn more, to connect with people in a way that it just goes beyond vocabulary and grammar. Like, abgezapft und verkorkt is just a phrase that you'll hear all the time, and it's taken from a cult comedy program called L'Oreal, which today is just not really popular anymore. So again, that's not even, it's a generational thing as well. So in fact, just taking an interest in these kind of cultural quirks is one way to go a bit deeper and to help your own language learning develop. You don't just have to watch Second World War documentaries or study the rise of Hitler. Germany does have a lot more to offer than this one-dimensional image that we're usually presented with in the UK. And so despite all these struggles, the benefits of learning German far outweigh the challenges. My entire life is now in German. And, there's obvious social benefits to learning a foreign language, but also cognitive. This is something which technology cannot help with. Sure, you can translate everything in ChatGPT now, but you're not getting any of the cognitive benefits with that. Learning and speaking a foreign language is like an intense workout for your brain, and it forces you to think in new ways and to process information differently, to juggle different meanings and contexts. And I really think that it helps us to think critically. So through learning a language, you really improve your learning ability in general, and there is a lot of crossover with many other areas of life. It really is about opening a window into a new way of thinking, which is not something you can access by doing anything else. And so I would just say double down on the basics. Word order, sentence structure, and grammar. This is very important and is probably the most challenging part for native English speakers. But if you get this done in the beginning, then it becomes very easy to just expand your vocabulary later on. I would say don't go it alone. Gamify the process, make it as fun as possible, and you are going to have to allow yourself to be corrected and humiliated and humbled throughout the learning process. So you will need to put your ego aside. So just remember, even though it might be harder for native English speakers to learn, that is not an excuse. That is actually a motivation to try harder and put in more effort and more time to improve your German language skills. So I hope this provided a little bit of motivation if you are struggling with it. There is no way to avoid it but to just keep going, and I promise you it gets a lot easier with time. Thanks so much for watching. Take care and bye-bye.